and welcome to this week's episode of Art Like Everything Else, the podcast where we use art to talk about everything else. And I'm your host, Mo, and this week we're going to be talking about curiosity. So, curiosity is defined as the desire to learn or know something. And I think it is actually really, really important that we all kind of get this skill. I personally do believe that curiosity itself is a skill, especially for being a person. And I'm going to use a couple of works of art to talk about just that. So let's hop into our first one. So for our first work of art, we're going to be discussing a movie called Short Circuit. This movie was released in 1986, and it's it was actually a pretty solid film. So spoiler free discussion of the movie ensuing. I The movie was okay. I wouldn't say it was great, but like it was a movie. And that's all I can say about it. Like, it wasn't bad. It had all the right beats and everything for it to be a movie, but it was a movie. It's not one that I personally would care to revisit, but I can see why it might be some people's favorite. So, take with that what you will. We're going to get into a brief discussion of the movie. I'm not going to be giving any spoilers in case you do want to watch the movie yourself. So, this movie follows a robot who's made in like this military lab, and then it is struck by lightning and it becomes sentient. It escapes the lab and it runs away and it starts to kind of learn about what it is to be a person, and like it starts just learning a bunch of things about being a person and about like what it means to be alive. And it's actually really, really cute. Like you see it discovering music, you see it kind of like noticing like, oh, so what is this? What is this? And it's like the curiosity is kind of like compelling him and kind of helping to shape who he feels he is and how he engages and interacts with the world. And it's really fascinating to see that and to watch that. And it's a major part of the conversation that I want to have. So the movie itself isn't very long, and there's definitely a lot more into the movie than what I'm just kind of talking about. But the part I want to focus on very specifically is the curiosity portion. So like him desiring and wanting to know what it is to be human and like learning and all the things he kind of learns in order to do just that. But yeah, without giving away too many spoilers, I think I'm going to stop it there. And let's jump into our next work of art. Alrighty, so for our next work of art, we're going to be talking about a movie we've spoken about before, Wally. And so Wally was a movie we talked about in a previous episode when we were talking about robots. And it's a really cool episode. I'm gonna link it in the description box below. Definitely go back and check it out if you haven't already watched it. But that episode, I wasn't talking about curiosity. I was kind of just talking about the role robots often kind of play in film or in TV. And so definitely check it out. I found some pretty cool facts that I talked about in that episode. So you might learn something, because I definitely learned something while I was researching that episode. But for this episode, I want to focus on Wally's curiosity about the environment around him. So when we first are introduced to Wally, well, let me give you a brief description in case you didn't watch the other episode or you haven't seen the movie. A brief sort of synopsis about this movie. There's a Earth has become a wasteland. There's one robot that survived, and he's kind of collecting trash and doing the job he was technically put on Earth to do. They find Then it is discovered that like all the people have been sent to space, and there's a sort of scout robot that comes down to try to see if life is sustainable on Earth. And adventures ensue, things happen, fun is had, and we have a cool movie. I don't want to give any spoilers in case you haven't seen it, but the focus of today's conversation is the curiosity bit, and so that doesn't really take up terribly much of the movie anyway, because it's really just how Wally is, and it's not so much of pertaining to the story of the movie. I'm sure it definitely adds to the movie, but that's not the main point of the conversation. So, Wally in the movie is a very curious little robot, even though he is down and he is on the planet Earth all by himself. Well, he has a pet roach. So outside of him and his pet roach, is really he's just going around doing the job he was kind of left on the Earth to do, which is like compact trash into little cubes. But while doing that, he also, every time he finds something fascinating or interesting, he collects it and he brings it back to his little room. And you can kind of, in the beginning, we see him in his little room full of all these little things. And it's really, really cute. Throughout this movie, you kind of see him and like just how curious he is about the environment around him. And he's finding all these very, even like the smallest of things to kind of like bring him joy and make him like happy. And you can see that these kind of trinkets sort of bring him a lot of joy in how he interacts with them. Like he learns, like he has records and all that kind of stuff. It's really, really cute. And I found it absolutely adorable. So yeah, curiosity is the key here. It's really important to be curious, no matter the circumstances, because honestly, also this curiosity could very well save you, because there were quite a few different times where Wally's curiosity accidentally saved him or his friend, and sometimes that's all it takes. Just being a little curious could put you in line or in focus with what it is that you actually need. And that's kind of going to be a part of today's conversation. So actually, let's have the conversation. Alrighty, so for the conversation for today, we're talking about curiosity. And curiosity is really, really important. We have so many things in this world that we can be curious about. But I feel like because of the way the world works and because of the way the world wants, at least the way the world wants to work, there's a focus on pushing, like just pushing through, just going through, just not even asking any questions, just doing what you're told. And that is frustrating and that is boring. And it is understandable why, because of the the load, cognitive load, the mental, physical toll that working and existing in the society we kind of have today of this like hustle culture, um, it makes sense why people probably are too exhausted to be a bit curious. But kind of like how Wally, even though he's in this wasteland of Earth, even sometimes, even just the smallest of things, being curious about the smallest of things can bring us a lot of joy. And so that's something I really want to encourage us to do. I want to encourage everyone to be more curious, to question more things, to be willing to learn about something that you never even knew about. Like the robot in Short Circuit. He was, when he became sentient, he became almost obsessed, I'd say, with learning and trying to understand the world around him. And sometimes you have to go at it at that type of fervor. Sometimes we're that robot in Short Circuit. Sometimes we are Wally, and so like maybe we are do have a job or a lifestyle that can't be put on hold to try to like maybe rediscover ourselves in a way as kind of what happened in Short Circuit. Maybe you have a job you have to do, a life you have to live that has very, very specific rules and regulations and expectations. And so you have to meet those rules and regulations and expectations. But it is still possible to find even the smallest of things that you can look at or at least engage and allow for that to be a part of what brings you joy in your day to day. Finding just even just one thing to be curious about or one thing to like reflect on that you've been maybe even been curious about in the past, it can be really, really important and really, really cool. Because kind of how I feel like the robot sort of reflected in the Short Circuit film. Side note, I do think it's fascinating that we kind of like in talking about curiosity, I'm kind of referring back to robots, even though I had a whole episode of robots previously that I was talking about like one of the many roles that robots can play in film, and now I'm talking about robots in a completely different capacity, but they also still really work well for this specific conversation. And I think it's because robots are seen as just like learning apparatuses, and so like they are expected to learn and engage and get new information in order to work. And surprise, surprise, people are very similar. Like you have to learn things and do things in order to be able to do things. And so I know like how robots they're relatively similar in that regard. So let's be a little bit more like these robots. But anyways, back to what I was saying. So I feel like the robot in Short Circuit sort of kind of encapsulated what it is to be a person. The very nature of being a person is not just community, which is something I often preach and will continue to preach, but also being curious. So, like being curious about the world around you and how you can best engage the world around you. It is important to not only want to be a part of the community you're in and the world that you're inhabiting, but you should also want to know more about it. And that's what being curious can kind of, that skill can help you kind of be able to do. Like, if you want to know more, you get to learn more. You can become a better community member. You can become a better person also. And it's almost just like it's cyclical. It's like once you're able to do one thing, you're able to engage and help yourself and those around you in other ways. And it's really, really fascinating how that is the case. And yes, the world might seem like a very sucky, sucky place to be in right now. But guess what? In that case, we can be like Wally and we can still have our curiosities and just maintain those curiosities right alongside this job in this rundown like society that we might be existing in. Like we're allowed to want more outside of what we have going for ourselves in this very moment. And that is what I am hoping to be able to encourage everyone who's listening to this podcast and listening to this episode, especially, to be able to do. I want people to be more curious. Curiosity is probably my favorite thing. I love learning new things. I love questioning and wanting to figure out what things are, how things work, all kinds of things like that. And it makes so much sense to me because for me being curious is almost ingrained. I would not be who I am if I did not want to or seek out the ability to learn more information and to learn more about the world around me. I love learning. I love being able to share what I learned. I love being a part of the learning experience. So like fun fact, I've done a lot of teaching and tutoring in my life, and it's something I really, really enjoy. I love everything about learning, and at the core of learning is curiosity. And I know I wouldn't be who I am without being curious. And sometimes people can try to beat that out of you or find it annoying. But I think wanting to know more about what's going on around you is at the core of who we are as people. I think it makes sense why, as children, like, and children now, very often, like, the main question they might ask is the why. Like, why are things done this way? Why do I have to wear that? Why do I have to eat this? Things like that. It's like you want to know why because it helps your brain make those connections, which makes it easier to form habits or to form thought patterns and form values and ideas and all of those things. And so it's like knowing why, the desire to learn more, the desire to know how and why and what and all the things about you are and how that's going, I think it's going to be important to consider that, hey, maybe I need to ask some questions. Maybe I need to consider some other perspectives because we're not alone on this planet either. So it's like being curious about not just how you're engaging the world, but also about how maybe those around you are engaging the world can help for you to make a whole like more well-rounded idea of the world you exist in. So it's like it's why I'm able to talk to so many people and I'm able to try to find something to talk about, or how I'm able to be in community with folks and be able to see things from so many different perspectives because I've gotten a chance to speak to so many different people just from these skills I've acquired in order to be able to like build up the world inside of my head. Like there are shows I've watched where I may have seen a recipe or something and I specifically tried that food or that recipe so that way if I ever watch that show again, as I'm watching, I'm like, I know what that tastes like. I know how much work goes into actually making that dish. That's a lot of work. So I can understand why somebody might be upset if you spend all this time in the kitchen making this very elaborate dish and then they come home and they don't even like acknowledge your efforts or anything like that. Like I can understand why you might be hurt about a situation like that. Or even like the other side, like I like getting experience or speaking to people who've had very tough jobs or very like just rough life experiences. It's like I understand why you might be frustrated in regards to this very specific situation in regards to you. And so it makes sense for you to be upset at something like this. And I understand why, because you're upset, why it reflects in your actions in this way. So it's like the more you learn, the more you're able to understand like not just how the world works, but the more you're also able to even just be in community with people because it allows for you to engage people more. And I think that's important. I think it's very important. So let's get into being curious and back to our base human skills, like sort of like the robot in short circuit. And then let's also, even if we can't be on curious constantly, let's try to find some little things to be curious about to be able to find some joy in the humdrum of this hustle culture that we're kind of forced to live in, like Wally in Wally. So maybe, just maybe, being curious too can be in art like everything else. Last and certainly not least is this week's all moment. So this week's all moment, honestly, it was a bit of a toss up. So I was trying to consider what might I have the conversation for this week be, and I was like thinking of like, maybe a kid show, like because kid shows are very often um, kind of built around like explaining that why and like encouraging your children or children in general. They don't have to be your children, um, but encouraging children to question and to learn and to engage and how to be little people. And I was trying to find a specific one, but then I was like, they all kind of do that, or at least they're all supposed to do that. They all kind of encourage your child to be curious. They encourage your child to want to know more and to, and sometimes you can even see the behavior of like how to ask for help or how to ask for things or how to engage curiosities you might be having as a child. You can see how that behavior can be modeled in children's television. And so I think I'm just going to kind of talk about children's television in general, as the art that kind of made me think this week. I think having, especially like having good quality children's television is going to be really important going forward, especially if you want to keep this curiosity alive in children and in adults. I think you should be, you, if you ever need to kind of like feel like you need to turn your brain off, I think you should, it's okay if you want to watch a child's cartoon or something like that. Like, turn your brain off. Let it not have to work as hard to engage the content that you're watching, and just relax. I think it's cute. Granted, I've kind of had to do that. Like, I have nephews who I watch TV with, and they're not very old, so I often do have to like engage cartoons and stuff anyway. But I enjoy it. So yeah, it's like kids cartoons really do a good job of just trying to encourage the idea of being curious and how to be curious. And I think it's something we should continue to encourage and promote and preserve. So like I know not too long ago, PBS got lost some funding, and I believe Sesame Street had to move to another platform, and that's very sad. I'm glad it was able to find another home, because Sesame Street is definitely one of the kids shows I was thinking about when it came to this topic about like a show that definitely encourages curiosity and wanting to know more. And we definitely want to preserve shows like that. So yeah, let's do what we can to help keep curiosity alive, not just in ourselves, but in the children and to preserve for our futures. Yeah. But yeah, that's all I have for today's conversation. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think of today's episode, or maybe drop your favorite kids cartoon. I'm curious, and so I want to know. Drop it in the comments. Feel free to follow me on TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter at the Lovely Infinite. The at is on the screen. TheLVLYINFINITE. No, just one E. And if you'd like to stay up to date with this podcast and all the other projects I'll be working on, follow me at Art Like Studios on TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram. But yeah, thank you for listening. Thank you for being. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.